I am super excited to be able to present the ARIN Treasurer's Report to you. And as always, I know that the Treasurer's Report is the reason you've all stayed on Zoom all morning or afternoon. I could not serve as treasurer without the help and support of the ARIN staff and my colleagues on the Board of Trustees. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Financial Services Department for their continued dedication to evolving financial reporting and metrics that the board relies on so heavily. Congratulations, Val, on your well-deserved retirement. Enjoy this next chapter. And thank you so much for onboarding me 3 years ago and for making sure that Brian and the rest of the team are able to take over FSD in such a seamless way. I know you will be missed by the rest of the team. I'm going to update you all on the activities of the Finance Committee. I will review the 2020 year-to-date financial results, look at customer growth, provide highlights of the investment portfolio, and then finally look at ARIN's financial position. Next slide, please. The Finance Committee has been really busy this year. We reviewed the financial statements for 2019 and reviewed and acted on recommendations coming from a risk assessment done by the audit firm. We continue to monitor revenues to ensure that there were no negative impacts on our cash flow as a result of the pandemic. We spend considerable time reviewing and updating the investment policy statement in consultation with our investment consultants. We reviewed and recommended board approval of the 2019 Form 990. Before 2020 is over, we will review recommendations coming out of 2 RFPs that were issued for required services. But the greatest time of the year is upon us. It's budget time. We delve into that starting next week. Next slide, please. This chart shows you total revenues to September 30th. Registration maintenance fee revenue is about 90% of our total revenues. And it turns out that 2020 maintenance fee revenue is virtually the same as 2019. These revenues are about 4% below budget, due simply to a lack of forecasted growth. Revenue from allocation and assignment of initial internet resources has grown 9% in 2020 to $1.1 million, and we're a bit ahead of budget. Other revenues are approximately $450,000 through September 30th, and this revenue line is below 2019 actual and 2020 budget. Overall, however, revenues are the same as 2019 and did not grow as fast as they had been forecasted to. Next slide, please. Where does revenue come from? It comes from our customers. We've seen a registration services plan customer increase of about 9% since September of last year, and almost all those additions are in the small to 3x small categories. Our end user customer base of just over 16,000 is actually a small decrease from September of 2019. And similar to my April report, the material growth continues to be in our small categories. Next slide, please. This chart shows you our operating expenses. The significant 2020 budget variance is driven by below budget headcount and the changes to spending caused by the pandemic. Overall, expenses are 11% under budget and slightly less than our operating expenses at the same time last year. Next slide, please. On this chart, I'm going to show you and talk to you about the material budget variances. So for context, personnel expenses represent about 58% of our total operating expenses. Our personnel costs were below budget at September 30th by $300,000. Turnover and delayed hiring of some of our open positions contributed to this variance. However, embedded in this variance is an over budget position in accrued comprehensive leave. This line item is almost $140,000 more than budget because employees have not been taking the normal amount of vacation time as a result of the pandemic. This is a phenomenon that many organizations are experiencing. The health and well-being of our staff is of paramount importance to the ARIN board. ARIN continues to encourage team members to take time off and highlights the fact that time off is a necessary break to maintain good health for both physical and mental well-being. The variance of $1 million in travel and member meetings is, of course, driven by the pandemic and the cancellation of all travel since the middle of March. The public relations and outreach variance is also a reflection of the ban on travel. Next slide, please. ARIN's investment portfolio. Our portfolio is allocated into 3 distinct funds, as I often tell you, and each with their own different investment objective. The chart in front of you illustrates the investment portfolio balances over the last 9 months. You'll note that the portfolio balances have recovered from the February and March market corrections, and at the end of September, the portfolio balance stood at $30.6 million. The Finance Committee and ARIN staff continues to work very closely with ARIN's investment consultants to manage our investments. Next slide, please. ARIN's net assets are shown on this chart. We have experienced an increase in our net assets due to the combination of an operating surplus over the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year and the increased valuation in the investment portfolio since January 1st. This is very positive news for ARIN. Next slide, please. Net assets as a percentage of operating expenses is a new metric that we presented last year at ARIN 44. And it's a metric that can be used to demonstrate the financial health of a not-for-profit organization. At the end of December, ARIN's net assets are predicted to be sufficient to cover almost 17 months of operating expenses. This is an increase over 2019. The Finance Committee and the ARIN management team continue to monitor this very important benchmark. Next slide, please. ARIN's statement of financial position or balance sheet at September 30th is the last piece of the finance story and my treasurer's report. The growth in our cash position reflects the reduced spending caused by the pandemic. This available cash will be a great help going into 2021. The increase in deferred revenue reflects the implementation of a new accounting regulation in 2019 that resulted in more revenue streams being deferred and recognized over a 12-month period. Finally, I talked about the increase in net assets of $1.5 million a few charts ago. Essentially, this is an unremarkable balance sheet, but I mean that in a really good way. ARIN's financial position is a healthy one. Next slide, please. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Nancy? I see something. Yes. We have Andrew Dull asking, has the board made or considered changes in the investment strategy or reserve allocation given the current pandemic challenges?
Good question.
Good question. And the answer to that question is yes. The Finance Committee and the board have spent a lot of time discussing that very topic. It's something, of course, that we are paying close attention to, and one of the things that we are working on in revising the investment policy statement.
Very good. Microphones are open for anyone who wants to ask a question or post it in the
David
QA.
Huberman has a question.
David Huberman.
I can't. Go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Paul. I yield to the chair always.
No, it's fine.
David Huberman asks, does the board have a current target for net assets as a function of operating expenses?
David Huberman, thank you very much for that question. As I was going through my presentation, I thought, I wonder what the target is. No, we don't have a target, but thank you. We will be looking at that at the very next FinCom meeting. Very good question. Thanks, David.
Okay. Looking, I see another question. Someone else was typing that. Okay. And Jim Godbane asks, Nancy, where is the tiara?
Jim.
I guess you're being anointed queen.
I'm being
queen of our
called out.
finance. Certainly.
No, we have to start with it's happy birthday to Nancy. Yes, it's Nancy's birthday today.
Happy birthday to Nancy. I did not know.
Thank you.
Very nice.
And you all
Okay,
have to put up with my singing, so I'm sorry about that.
It is actually my birthday today, and typically, so the reason for Jim's question is that typically on my birthday, I wear a tiara all day.
Got it.
I thought maybe that wasn't a good campaign strategy. And so I'm not wearing my tiara today. Last year, I showed up at ARIN 44 in a paper bag, and it seemed maybe a bad idea to show up today in a tiara. So
Very good. Any other questions for Nancy?
We have a hand raised actually, Johnson. Maybe
Okay.
we can go to that, staff, please. Mike, if you can remember to say your name and affiliation, by the way, as a gentle reminder to anyone asking questions. Go ahead, Mike, when we get your mic open. There you go, Mike.
All right, Mike, you are able to unmute.
Was playing with the buttons and I don't have a question.
No problem, Mike. It's good to know. It means the system works. Thank you for that.
but still the most
It's good to
questions,
hear you, Mike. Thank you.
the most questions I've ever had after a finance presentation. Can I just go back to David's question for 1 second?
Of course.
David, there is a target, minimum 12. We don't have a maximum.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, and I see Paul's ready. So we're going to transition